It's Ash from Super Videos back for another video for the Walking Dead universe. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at finding Rick and everything that comes with that. I'm particularly focusing on Maggie and Negan's role in the story that we might see when it comes to finding Rick. Now, what I'm gonna talk about here, or my predictions or theory, whatever you want to call it, is not necessarily something I'm expecting to happen in the series finale. In fact, I highly doubt that we're gonna see it in the series finale, but I do think, or I hope, that we see some variation of this in one of the spin-offs, specifically either the Michonne and Rick spin-off or the Negan and Maggie spin-off. So stay tuned, we'll be right back to break this down. Alright, as always, before we dive into it, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. With that said, let's dive right into it. So of course, we do know that the question of who will find Rick is still a mystery. We don't know the first person that's gonna come in contact with him. Will it be just Michonne first and then everybody else? Or will it be someone, particularly people within one of the spin-offs that we have planned, either the Daryl spin-off or the Negan and Maggie spin-off? Now, I'm not gonna focus on the Daryl spin-off too much because I already did another prediction looking at it from that angle. So in this one, I'm particularly gonna focus a little more on how Maggie and Negan might start the search for Rick and how that might come about. But the first thing I want to say is the question that I think all fans have at this point is, what does Maggie really feel about Rick? If Maggie finds out that Rick is alive, will she want to search for him right away? Or will she want to wait or not even trouble herself to look for Rick? And the reason why I say that is because as much as those two were pretty close, they also had their differences. We know that when it comes to leading strategies and kind of egos colliding, there was definitely some sort of collision of ideas and strategies with Maggie and Rick. And all of it, of course, had to do with the Negan situation. What will they do with Negan? Maggie wanted Negan dead, but Rick put him in a jail cell. But now, being where we are in the story, and based on what we know and where we know the story is going to go, we know that Negan and Maggie are going to be in a spin-off together. There's going to be some sort of a story where they're going to be teaming up to do something. So that whole thing about Maggie questioning Rick about the Negan situation all becomes a moot point because it doesn't matter. Because at this point, Maggie is essentially in a place where she could make a decision in terms of what to do with Negan, but every time she's not really willing to take this step forward to just kill him, which means that she either sees Negan as an ally now and someone that she can trust, and she feels that he's changed, which is not the way I think the situation is at this point, but the other way, which I think is more likely where Maggie's head is at, which is that she could utilize Negan to do the dirty work. She could utilize Negan to kind of be the voice of the evil in her ear. You know what I mean? So I feel like at this point, regardless of what Maggie might think about Negan and the things that he's done, she's not willing to kill him because she wants his expertise. Now, with all of that said, I feel when Maggie finds out that Rick is alive, she's probably gonna be hesitant, but she's gonna want to help, and she's going to want to kind of take the step to search for him. And this is where I have a scenario in mind, which I hope they do, which they might not necessarily, but I hope they do. And it has to do with how is Maggie now going to take that news with Rick being alive and bring that news to Negan? And how is that all going to go? You know what I mean? So regardless of whether this happens in the series finale as part of something that leads to the spin-off with Maggie and Negan, or if it's something that happens later on in the Negan and Maggie spin-off, doesn't really matter. What I think matters is how is it all gonna really come together. I feel like we might see some sort of an exchange to this effect where Maggie goes to Negan and asks if he wants to help in some sort of a mission, which obviously has to do with finding Rick. And I think at that point, Maggie might bring up the question of whether Negan is willing to help find the person that was responsible for, what happened during the war with the Saviors. And I think here is where the story could get interesting, with Negan kind of having to reconsider things. You know what I mean? Negan has always been the type of person that is easily able to adapt to any situation, and nothing really surprises him to a point where he doesn't know how to handle the situation. But I feel like if Maggie comes to Negan with this particular news, he will be taken back a little bit. And I think that he's not going to necessarily be able to come up with a quick response to Maggie's question of whether he wants to help find Rick. I mean, something else that they could do with Maggie is Maggie asking Negan, do you want to see an old foe? Something like that. And I definitely think the wording is important. And the reason for that is because the way Maggie brings that to Negan is gonna impact Negan's decision. If Maggie just comes out and says, do you want to come find Rick? I think it's not going to be quite as impactful to Negan as if Maggie brings up the old animosity that Rick and Negan obviously had. But regardless of that whole situation, I feel like another thing that is definitely quite important is how these two characters, Negan and Maggie, are able to put away their differences in order to find Rick, and whether they can even do that. Because every time Rick's name comes up, there's tons and tons of memories that come flooding back, and there's tons and tons of hard feelings that resurface, which may not be able to go away necessarily as easily as you might expect. So that's also another thing to keep in mind. Now, putting away the Maggie conversation, let's talk a little bit more about Negan. Let's assume that Negan is able to overcome this feeling of not really wanting to help find Rick, and this feeling of kind of wanting to get away from that whole thing altogether because of the memories that it brings back, and because of, having to face Rick if they find him after all these years. Let's say that he puts all of that aside, and let's say that Negan is willing to find Rick, and, he'll do anything to search for Rick and to be able to find him. Now, the big question really becomes, what is Rick gonna do? How is Rick gonna respond? If Rick sees, let's say, Negan or just Negan and Maggie approach, or a situation where the two of them stumble upon Rick or something like that, how is Rick gonna take that? Is Rick gonna kind of be able to ignore the situation and kind of get away from wherever he's at and kind of escape and then deal with the situation? Or is he gonna be sort of like in a headspace where he's like, I don't care about this, I'm gonna do my own thing, I don't want you guys helping me? That's another important thing to keep in mind. So as you can tell, there's a bunch of different things that could make the situation a little sticky and a little difficult any way that you look at it. Now, even forgetting about that whole situation, I think another thing that could potentially cause some conflict is what happens after. I mean, let's say if Negan does find Rick, and if the two of them are able to squash their beef and kind of get on with it until they win whatever battle they're involved in, what's going to be the conversation that they're going to have? What is the first thing that they're going to talk about? What are they going to really say to each other in order to make the two of them move forward. Maybe in the same way that Maggie and Negan have now moved forward or will move forward by the start of the spin-off with Negan and Maggie. And let's say even if they do find some sort of a way to move forward and cooperate and work together, if Rick is in a position of having some sort of power at the Civic Republic military, and this is obviously after everything is done, what is Negan's role gonna be? Is Negan gonna go back to jail? Is he gonna be exiled? Or is it gonna be a situation where, just like the comics a little bit, Negan is the devil on Rick's shoulder and kind of act as one of Rick's top lieutenants as the Civic Republic military? Obviously, this is way down the line, but just something to keep in mind and something that could make the story quite interesting if they do end up going that direction. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in this video. A lot of different possibilities, a lot of different storylines that could come together, a lot of different scenarios, regardless of what the situation is and what the outcome of all of it is. At the end of the day, it's ultimately going to come down to, is Negan willing to work with Rick and potentially Maggie and others when they do in fact take over the Civic Republic military, if that happens? And also the reverse of that, is Rick gonna be okay with that? Is Maggie gonna be okay with that? Is Daryl gonna be okay with that? And again, any way I look at it, it's not gonna happen, which means that we might see a storyline where Negan is either exiled or there's some sort of a power struggle that occurs, but it won't be a violent and physical sort of overthrow. It'll be more of a kind of political game. You know what I mean? But that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video.